everybody, Michael Davis here. Welcome to Bone2Pick. We are coming to you today from Carroll's Studios, Midtown Manhattan on West 55th Street. I am really excited to have an opportunity today to sit down with our Artist of the Month for April, trombonist extraordinaire by every measure possible. He's an esteemed educator, a philanthropist, the great Weston Sprott. Weston has been a member of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra since 2005. He has performed with the Philadelphia Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic, the Atlanta Symphony, the Oslo Philharmonic, just to name a few. He has previously held positions with the Pennsylvania Ballet Orchestra and the Delaware Symphony. He is active worldwide as a chamber musician and soloist, making his Carnegie Hall debut as a soloist in 2007, followed up in 2010 with his debut CD, Act One. He is the head of the brass department at the Manna School of Music here in New York City, also on the faculty at the Bard College, Rutgers University, and the Juilliard Pre-College Division. He attended Indiana University and got his degree from the esteemed Curtis Institute in Philadelphia. And before we jump in, I just want to give a special shout out to our mutual friend Michael Deese, one of the great trombone players in the world, and I was fortunate to fill in for Michael last month at his outstanding program at Michigan State, and we were sitting in his office, and there was a poster of Weston up, and I said, "Oh wow, man, I'd love to get Weston on the Bone2Pick series. That'd be awesome." And he says, "All right, great, I'll text him right now." And it seemed like within a half hour, an hour, we had this scheduled. So very grateful to Michael and. Weston, especially grateful to you. I know you just came from rehearsal. You've got a big performance tonight with the Met, so thank you for taking time out of your crazy busy schedule.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, let's jump in, talk about your early years. I know you grew up in Spring, Texas, I think it was, and outside of Houston.
Correct.
And just tell us about what made you get into a trombone.
Well, Spring is a northern suburb of Houston, so I grew up there, and like most people in Texas, we were huge high school football fans. So every Friday, Saturday, even before I was in high school, me and my family, that was kind of the thing to do. We'd look and see what best teams are playing in town. We'd go to the football game. Every stadium in town has 10, 15,000 people. And of course, at the football games, one of the biggest things going, of course, is the marching band.
Right.
So we'd always make a point to sit next to the band because I always thought that was really cool. We were interested in the halftime shows. It was a big entertainment type of thing. And I was attracted to the trombone. Why? You know, when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, I can't exactly say why, but I would imagine it had something to do with the movement. A lot of times back then in high school, you know, the trombone players have a sleeve on their slide with the name of the school, and it just seems like a cool thing. It seems like those are the guys who are having fun.
Right.
So when it came time to choose an instrument for the 6th grade, I decided that I wanted to play the trombone. I made a sound on it, and the band director said that it sounded really good. He said, "That sounds really good, you should put that kid on trombone." So who knows if I actually sounded good or if they were just desperate for trombone players, so they thought they would weasel me into it or something, but that's kind of how that happened. And from that point forward, I just always loved to play. It was never a thing. I don't think my parents ever encouraged me to practice or ever told me that I needed to practice. I just always did it because it was just a lot of fun for me. So if I have any memories from my early musical days, it was my parents or my mom coming to the school to tell me I have to come home because, you know, school would end at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and it would be 6 o'clock, and she was wondering, where is this kid? And she'd go up to school, and I'd still be there practicing. So that was the way it went. And then through high school, it became, again, a little bit more serious. I had some colleagues, or classmates, I guess I should call them. Being a professional, I think of colleagues, but at that time, just high school classmates. And we were really into it. So Tim Higgins, who's principal trombonist of San Francisco Symphony, we were in the same graduating class of high school. We played in the same band. We were constantly first, second chair, that type of thing. And it just made it really fun and really competitive. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I decided this is something that I think I really love and I'd like to try to do for a living. So around 15, 16 years old, that's kind of when the lens changed to something to being more serious and more career oriented. And from that point forward, the trajectory goes to Indiana and Curtis and eventually to here in New York.
Wow, cool. Boy, it's always a big thing when the band director loses their trombone section, but talk about losing the trombone section.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. Let's talk about IU and Curtis.
Sure.
And I know, thanks to Michael DC, told me what a proud member of the IU community you were, and I'm sure you feel the same way about Curtis. But maybe talk about your college experience.
Well, I went to Indiana first. I did 2 years of undergraduate study at Indiana, and I loved it there. What's interesting is the way that I came to Indiana is that As a high school student, I didn't really know much about music schools because I didn't take regular private lessons. I wasn't in the Houston Youth Orchestra or whatever they call it. See, I don't even know the name of it because I wasn't in it. And neither of my parents were musicians, so they weren't able to give me advice in that direction. The one thing that they knew was that they weren't 100% comfortable with me going into music as a career. So they suggested that I find a school that has other good programs. And so I looked at U.S. News and World Report, and I noticed that University of Michigan and Indiana University both had top 10 programs for music and top 10 programs for business. So those became the two schools that were at the top of my list, so I applied to those. It wasn't because of advice. When I did the college visits, Indiana was a place that I enjoyed the most. I had a great time there, and so I enrolled at Indiana. So my first day at Indiana, we have the placement auditions for orchestras. And what's cool there is they do all of the auditions every semester behind the screen. I'm a big advocate of screened auditions. So even in college, everyone auditions behind the screen. And if you know Indiana, it's a place with 50, 60 trombone players. It's a huge department. So actually, it's a good place to go to kind of get a feel for where you are in the pecking order if you have a chance to be successful. And thankfully or luckily or whatever, I won that first audition. And with a little bit of youthful arrogance, I then proceeded the next day to march down to the registrar's office and drop all the business classes. I didn't tell my parents till months later. Sorry, Mom. But you know, they weren't too happy about that. They eventually got over it.
Well,
I think they got over the day I got a job.
Now.
I think they got over the day I got a job, and not a moment before. But you know, Indiana was a great school because we had a huge studio, so there was a lot of camaraderie. There was also a lot of healthy competition. You got to feel what it's like to compete on a regular basis, to take regular auditions, and of course, just having a general college experience. I had season tickets to football. We went to tons of basketball games, student union, living in a dorm. All of those things were things that I thought were really valuable for, you know, for my education. It's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. So then, were you there 2 years then? And
I was there for 2 years, and then I transferred to Curtis, and I was at Curtis for 3 years.
Okay.
And as you can imagine, Curtis was the polar opposite.
Boy, I bet.
You know, basically you went from the largest music school in the country. I think it's always right on the edge between Indiana University and University of North Texas, which one of those has the largest enrollment of music students, to suddenly the smallest music school in the country. So a place that has 1,700 music students to one that has 150. And at the time, Curtis was a school that had no dorms, no student cafeteria. So you go from all of those things to you just live in an apartment somewhere in downtown Philly and you go to school, which is completely different, but I really enjoyed it, and it was exactly what I needed at that time. I love studying with Nitzan Haros. He was an amazing teacher. Carl Lenthy, by the way, was an amazing teacher as well at Indiana. I didn't choose to go to a different place because of any unhappiness at Indiana. I chose because I thought Curtis was a really special, unique opportunity. And one other thing to note, at that time, you had to be under 21 to audition to get into Curtis.
Oh, is that right?
So my feeling was at that time, if I don't audition and go now, I'll never get to go. So I should try it, and it thankfully worked out. But the greatest part of my education there was not only the lessons, but attending the Philadelphia Orchestra. I went to school there for 3 years, and I missed 3 concerts.
Wow, okay.
You could count on it, third mezzanine level on the side of the orchestra. I was there every week, like religion, for 3 years straight.
Wow.
Didn't miss any concerts, and I thought that was a huge part of the education, just listening. Because with guys like Nitzan and Eric Carlson and Matt Vaughn, Blair Bollinger, the standard is right in front of your face. And so every single week you go to a concert and say, if I want to do this for a living, I need to sound like that. And if you forgot, you come back the next week, and there it is all over again. And those guys were always playing at such a high level. It was pretty inspirational.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think you clearly dialed that in very early on. The listening part of it is so critical. And we had Blair on a few months back, and he was talking about the exact same thing, just how important that aspect of it is. Well, clearly you're already on the path to having success in this business, even as a college student. And then you were working with Delaware Symphony at this point. Were you still in school, or?
While I was still a student at school, a couple of local auditions came up. I think it was John Illica, who plays principal trombone in North Carolina Symphony. He had just left town, and he had been holding the principal position in several of these freelance orchestras, or regional orchestras, I guess I should call them, in Philadelphia. And so, thankfully, those two orchestras both had auditions right around, within a year of each other. Okay. And they were blind auditions again, screened from start to finish. And I thought this would be a great thing to do. have a little bit of money, and of course when you're in college you feel completely poor. So I took those auditions, and thankfully I won them. So even starting my senior year of college, I was concurrently a student at Curtis and the principal trombonist of those two orchestras, and subbing with the Philadelphia Orchestra, kind of jamming all those things together. And it was a great experience for me. It was a great learning curve in a lot of ways. And I remember playing Nutcracker 30 times for the first time, playing principal trombone in the Pennsylvania Ballet. And I don't know, at the time, this is 15 years ago, making $100 a service, and you do it all day. And when you finally go to the bank, you feel like you just made $10 million. Because you're in college and you're eating at the same place, once a week, trying to get like, a $5 sandwich and make it serve you for 3 meals, that type of deal. So I felt like I'd hit the lottery at that time. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, so right after that, I'm guessing then you won the position at the Met. Tell us about that.
Strangely enough, or coincidentally enough, the final round of the Met audition was the last day of school. So that's fortunate timing, to say the least. I remember it was May 5th, 2015, or sorry, 2005, May 5th, 2005. It was a Friday, and that was the last Friday of the semester. And my apologies to my art history teacher from the time, but I remember on that Tuesday before I left for the Met audition, which was going to be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I remember doing my last art history paper and printing it off and looking at this thing and going, I never want to have to do this ever again. We got to go win this thing. I'm so sick of being in school. And maybe that's a bad attitude to have, but that is the attitude I had. I was like, come on, we got to do this. I'm so sick of writing these papers and doing this and that. Let's go get it. Yeah. And thankfully it worked out.
Yeah,
and
clearly.
So I had the good fortune of going directly from being in school to directly in the Met Orchestra.
Wow. That is direct.
Yeah.
Graduation day, first day of being in the Met.
It was awesome.
Nicely timed on your part.
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah, just like we planned it.
Let's talk a little bit about. I mean, boy, you've been in the Met almost 15 years now.
Yeah, this is my 14th season. Yeah.
So you've maybe some of the it's such a great section, both the trombone section, the brass section, and I've been fortunate to work with many of you guys over the years, and it's always a pleasure hearing you. And you guys set such a high standard. Tell us a little bit, maybe some of the highlights that pop in your mind over the last. If you, I know, I'm sure every day is kind of a highlight, but
not every day is a highlight, but there are a lot of highlights. I think some of my favorites were playing ring cycle performances with Fabio Luisi was absolutely amazing. Our Parsifal with Daniela Gatti was absolutely incredible. Doing Parsifal and Electra last year, or in the last 2 years, with Yannick Nezezigan, our new music director. Elevational performances. Our De Frau and a Schatten with Vladimir Yurovsky. If I look back over the course of my last 14 years in the orchestra, those are ones that immediately jump out as these were those experiences that just lift you to a different place and make you feel like that's why you got into music. Those are ones I would come home and I couldn't sleep at night because I was so excited about what had happened, and my wife thinks I'm crazy. It's wake up, it's just like it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, you won't believe what just happened. It was so good. And as professionals, sometimes we can lose the sense of where the joy is in the music if you take the wrong perspective. And I remember when I was deciding to go into music, I thought back to a conversation that a teacher had with our class when we were kids in 6th or 7th grade. And he said, if you can find something that you love to do, you should try to do that for a living. And then I remember playing Guys and Dolls in the high school musical and thinking, this was so much fun. And that's back when you were just doing music for the joy of it.
Right.
You weren't thinking about winning a competition or making a paycheck. You were just having fun with your friends, making great music. And when I got to college, I remember Dick Woodhams, who was the principal oboist of the Philadelphia Orchestra. He said, on those days when you get down about playing music, or you get frustrated with your technique, or you're upset with one of your colleagues or something, think back to that day when you really fell in love with music, and then consider where you are now, and then reconsider how you feel about it. And so I'll oftentimes think back to being in that high school musical and playing Guys and Dolls and how much fun that was, me and Tim Higgins trading solos and having a great time. And the handful of performances I just listed to you are those ones where I think at those moments in time, making music was just as fun as it was when it was only about fun. So.
Wow, that's great. What is for those of us who live here in New York? The schedule for the Met Orchestra is legendary. Probably grueling might be another word. I'm sure
that's one way to put it.
I'm sure there's a few other words you could use as well. But just tell us what like a week is for you guys. And I know there's double sections, and maybe just break it down for people who know about the Met but don't know the inner workings of say the trombone section in your schedule.
Well, the Met does on average 7 performances a week. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and a double on Saturday. There's a matinee and an evening. And starting next year, we're actually going to be doing some performances on Sundays. The schedule is going to shift around, but there will still basically be 7 performances a week.
Wow, okay.
Then Monday through Friday, they're rehearsals. I'd say an average rehearsal is 10:30 in the morning to 1:30 p.m. And on any given week, you may have 5 rehearsals, you may have 3, you may have 4. That's always switching. But what we're contractually obligated to do is to play 4 performances a week. So, there's not oftentimes a situation where you're having to play all 7 performances, even though sometimes we do that. Last week, I actually played all 7 performances and I think all 5 rehearsals, which is a little crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So, we have enough players that you can rotate, and you're not required to play more than 4. But it's also worth mentioning that opera services are long. Mm-hmm. So, and I think an average opera is probably 3.5 hours. That's pretty standard. Sometimes they're a little shorter than that, but sometimes, for example, now we're doing the ring cycle, Götterdämmerung runs almost a full 6 hours in length, Parsifal 6 hours. So it's a demanding job, and it requires that you think about your career, or at least your days and your season, more like a marathon runner than a sprinter. Mm-hmm. When you sit in your chair, for example, we had a day last season, I believe, where we did a rehearsal of Electra, final dress rehearsal of Electra in the morning, and then a performance of Parsifal in the evening. So it's basically 8 hours of playing that day, plus you got to warm up twice, most likely, that type of thing. You really have to, from the first note you play that day, you got to start thinking about the last one. Because the end of Parsifal is you're slowly going pianissimo up to a high A flat and holding it, and if you've blew your face off completely in a lecture that morning, you might not have that. So you start thinking at 9 o'clock in the morning what you're going to have at 11:45 at night, because that happens sometimes.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, in terms of the section, do you guys get switched around all the time, or is there one section that works together and then switches out with the other section?
We rotate pretty much all the time.
Okay.
So our section has 2 principal trombone players, John Romero and Damian Austin. I play second. Paul Pollard and Steve Norell are the bass trombone players, and Paul is kind of our Wechselposaune position. He sometimes plays second. Right now he's actually playing bass trumpet in the ring, so he's kind of our flex chair. But we have a system of certain shows that are considered to be non-switchable. So for example, if you're playing a ring cycle opera, or there's a Strauss opera like Rosenkavalier or Electra that's considered to be either less commonly done or more difficult, we don't rotate. So once a section is established for that, that's the section for all the rehearsals and performances. And then we have what we call switchable shows, which are the standard operas that we feel like everyone knows, whether that's Tosca, Aida, Magic Flute, Carmen, Traviata, things like that. And so on those particular shows, it could be any section any given night. We just rotate those. That's where we have some degree of flexibility.
Wow, cool, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but that's good to know.
Yeah.
Let's shift the gears a little bit. Let's talk about your work as a chamber musician, as a soloist, and particularly wanted to talk about your Act 1 CD, and I'm guessing you're going to have more to come down the road here.
Yeah.
But talk to us about that side of your career.
That kind of came about a little bit more organically. Of course, when I was a kid or a high school student, I was listening to trombone CDs all the time, whether that was Laskey or Lindbergh, which were the 2 most common at the time. And of course, now there's tons of people making amazing solo CDs. That's something I always wanted to do. And when I got the position here in the Met, that kind of opened up the door to being able to call universities and say, I'd really love to do a solo recital. And it started off with me calling places and saying, I'd love to do a recital and a master class. I've always been passionate about that type of thing. To then, hopefully, I think I did a good job at some of those, and then other places started calling and said, hey, would you be willing to come and do that? So that kind of launched, I guess you could say, a career of being a guest soloist and guest artist on the university circuit. And then that kind of turned into doing things more on the chamber music circuit as well. So I'm a regular participant in a couple of chamber music festivals, which has been great fun for me. It's provided an opportunity to travel the world and see some really, really fun things, play some different types of music. I'm actually playing a chamber recital in a few weeks here in the Bronx, and we're going to do all Baroque music, which will be really interesting. Trombone and strings, which is one of my favorite combinations. It's really, really beautiful. So I enjoy that a ton. It's a great way to kind of branch out your career, and also I think as an orchestral musician, one of the things about playing in an orchestra, as great as it is trombone players are not in control of that situation. For one, trombone players oftentimes play a relatively accompaniment role. But beyond that, you don't get to choose the music, you don't get to choose who conducts, what you're going to play, when you're going to play it, how loud you're going to play it, how soft you're going to play it, whatever. And so playing chamber music in solo repertoire gives you an opportunity to feel like this is my artistic baby, and this is something I can choose what I want to play and do things the way that I want to do them. And it's an empowering place to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's good. Kudos to you for branching out into that world. I can see where it would be easy to not spend the energy to make that happen, but like you're saying, the reward that comes back to you musically is clearly on a whole different level. Again, let's shift a little bit. Talk about your teaching career. You are the head of the brass department at Mannes School of Music, which is now affiliated with New School.
It's a division of the New School.
Division of the New School here in New York City. Has been for a long time one of the important music conservatories in the city. How's that going for you? What's the program like up there for you?
I love teaching. The program is doing really, really well. We have some good trombone students. We have some good brass students in general. We've had some successful students recently, people who've won some jobs, mostly international positions. So that's been great. I've always had a passion for teaching. Actually, I think I can officially say now I'm the only person in my immediate family that does not have a degree in education.
Wow, okay. Doesn't seem to have hurt you at all.
Yeah, my sister just graduated from University of Oklahoma with an education degree. My brother has one. My mom has a master's in education, is a principal in elementary school. My dad has a degree in elementary education as well. So I think there's always been a passion for teaching and helping people and being an advocate for young people in my blood since the beginning of time. So, and believe it or not, I started teaching before I even had a teacher. When I was in high school, I started teaching lessons. That was my first job, you could say. I remember we'd go to region band auditions and you'd play, and then some of the younger kids would come and say, "Hey, could I come and take a lesson with you?" And you say, "Sure. How much do you charge?" "I don't know. What do you say, $20 or something? I'll drive over to your house and I'll teach you for an hour." And that was the very organic beginning of my teaching career. And so I've been doing that ever since. And for me, teaching's a real joy. I feel like there's something great about feeling like you're really helping people achieve something that they might not have been able to achieve on their own. In a selfish way, I think I learn a lot from teaching, and I've really found a lot of joy in teaching much, much younger students. Of course, I've had some people who are already professionals. I teach them lessons, and that's rewarding too. They go on and get a bigger job, and that's great. But there's something really interesting about teaching a kid who's in the 6th grade or the 7th grade, and they barely know how to put their instrument together, and it forces you to think about things differently. Because one of the great challenges of teaching is how can you, as hopefully a more mature and more developed musician, see things through the lens of that student. And when you're 36 years old, like I am now, trying to look and see what's happening in the mind of a 10-year-old. Because half the things you say, if you're speaking as though we were speaking to each other, we might as well be speaking in Chinese. So you have to, it's a real challenge to get back and think, well, this kid doesn't understand this reference or that reference or that reference. How can I explain this to someone in a way that will actually be useful to them? And also it makes you go back and think about the bare bones fundamentals in ways that you never would otherwise, because at a certain level, you just do things because that's the way you've always done them. You don't even think about it. But to go back and explain to someone who knows nothing or very, very little it's an interesting challenge. I like it.
Yeah, I had a great time going on your website, which everybody should check out his website. It's terrific. But I saw so many photos of you working with young people and the joy in their face. They're really great photos. You can tell you bring a lot of inspiration, despite the lack of the education degree. It's okay.
Exactly.
You seem to be doing just fine with that.
Right.
Plus, if Mike Deese calls you for a lesson, you're on the right track here.
Right. It's pretty funny.
Which is a true story. We know. Let's talk about some of your philanthropic interests and projects, and I'm kind of throwing that out there, but I was just reading some of the I was really impressed just that you seem to really think outside the box of the music thing in general, and how you're using your skills and your position, and just doing a lot of interesting things. It looked like from stuff. Maybe you could just talk about that. And sorry to make it such a general point, but
I don't think I'm personally wealthy enough to call myself a philanthropist, but I'm still a trombone player one way or the other. But I do think of myself as having a giving spirit, and all the things that I have done, I think they come from a very organic place. One of the most recent things that I did is I started a foundation that's going to support a festival that I work at in South Africa. There's a festival called the Stellenbosch International Chamber Music Festival. And a lot of the work that I've done there with South African students happened incredibly organically. I'll give you an example. There was my first year there was the first year that that festival had a trombone teacher. And the way that happened is because I knew someone who had gone to the festival, and I looked at the website and I said, they don't have a trombone teacher, but they're playing repertoire that has trombones. So I called them and said, I would love to come to your festival. I have a passion for teaching. You know, if you ever have a space, I would love to come. They said, oh, it's not going to work out this year or whatever. And I called back the next year. I said, I would love to come. And they said, okay, fine, come. I said, I don't care about the money, whatever. If you want to pay, you can pay. I just want to go and teach and work with these kids.
Wow.
So I did that. In that first year, there was a student there named Angus Peterson, who's still a really good friend of mine. Angus, if you're watching this, hi. And Angus came up to me the first day and he said, Mr. Sprott, I would love to take a lesson with you. This would be so great. So he took a lesson and I thought, okay, fine. And a couple days later, he comes back. He said, I recorded a lesson. I did everything. I practiced all this stuff. Can I have another lesson? I said, sure. He came back and everything that we had talked about was better. I went, okay. So we did this like 3 or 4 times over the course of 10 days. And he kept calling me on Skype and different things. I'd love to take another lesson. Can we talk about this, whatever? And I eventually said, boy, this is so difficult over Skype. I wish that you could just come to New York. He said, but I don't have enough money to do that. That would be crazy. And so that was the beginning of something, because they said, you know what? I'm just going to pay for you to come to New York. Just, you know, we'll go to the consulate, get your visa, everything taken care of. We'll fly you over to New York for 10, 12 days. You can stay with me, come to all the concerts, rehearsals, whatever. We'll do that. Fine. And it was a great experience. And the festival heard about that and decided, you know what? We should raise money because we heard about how great this experience is. And we'll do something called the 10 by 10 scholarship. So we can give that same experience to 10 other kids. It's the 10th anniversary of the festival. We'll have 10 kids go for 10 days to 10 different places all around the world to take lessons. And so that happened. A couple of years later, the festival said, you know what, we're struggling with some funding things. And so I said, you know what, I know there are a lot of people in the States who are really passionate about what's happening over there and would really want to support that work. What if I start a nonprofit foundation? And we'll just make it happen. I have some friends who I tell about this. They have passion for it. I'll ask them if they want to give some money. Can you raise $10,000? Sure, I can do that. So that's just one example. But these things kind of happen in a way that's very organic. You see a need and you decide, instead of talking about it, let's try to address it. And over time, having that attitude, I think, evolves into something bigger.
Yeah, man, that's inspiring. Man, especially all of us in the music business now, you know, we're always, not always, but a lot of times we're, you know, woe is us. The music business has changed so dramatically, and you know, and most definitely it has. You're absolutely correct. However, then you can be very proactive, like yourself, and create something that's going to, you know, stimulate and enrich and grow, you know, in a different way than it was 30, 40 years ago or whatever. It's at the times, as we were joking before we started, times are changing, and this is great. I mean, this is like, kudos to you, really, seriously. It's fantastic. Along those lines, I was looking on the site and I saw that schools were having you, and you had given a lesson on one of your blogs, I think, about your approach to goal setting. And I was wondering if you could just kind of, I've always been like like Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and all these guys. I love it, and I don't always apply it as much as I should, of course. But when I saw that, I was fascinated and just wanted to ask you if you would share your approach. It's clearly working extremely well for you, so we'd love to hear what
sometimes it works better than others. You know, I mean, not every goal you set you achieve, and then sometimes you set a goal and you get halfway through and you decide your goal has changed. You know,
of course,
what we desire for ourselves evolves. I think one of the best books I ever read was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And one thing I've gathered from that was begin with the end in mind. And another book was The Rejected Stone by Al Sharpton. And he talked about this. He says, the example he used was, when you go to the airport, what's the first thing they ask you? Where are you going? And if you don't have the answer to that question, none of the other questions even matter. But if you have a clear idea of where do I want to go, if you go to the counter and say, I want to fly to Tokyo and I want to fly first class, then it's very clear. Okay, let's see your passport. This is how much that ticket costs. That's how long it's going to take you to get there. You know, if you want to check 2 bags, it's going to cost this much, et cetera, et cetera. I think the same thing can apply to your music career. You know, the first thing you need to determine is where do you want to go? And once you figure that out, all the steps that precede that become much, much more clear. And then that's kind of in line with begin with the end in mind. It's this may be perhaps a dark way of thinking, but if you think about the day that you're going to be dead, what, you know, at that moment in time, what do you hope that people will have said about you? And for me, I think I determined that I don't want what people to say about me to be limited to Weston played a lot of trombone concertos and solo recitals, and he was really good, or not so good, or whatever you thought of me. And that's the end of the story. I would hope that there was more to it than that. And so that's established some goals for me about what do I want to prioritize in my life. Smaller goals, you know, do I want to improve my intonation, things like that? That's a totally different thing. But I'm trying to think a little bit more macro these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always found it good to have a combination of them, you know, because everything can't be a macro goal, but you have to have those in order to make the thing move forward in, like you're saying, in a significant, meaningful way.
With the micro goals, I think that might be useful for the audience also, especially for students who are out there. I think you have the long-term goals, which is kind of what we were just talking about. Then we also have medium and short-term goals. I like the idea of planning your practice out 1 week in advance.
Oh, wow.
I think that's, in an ideal world, I'm not going to lie and say that I do that every single week very diligently, you know, but when I'm my most disciplined self, I can do that. I'll plan out 1 week in advance. And I think the idea is that when you're planning only one day at a time, or you wake up in the morning and you decide, what am I going to do today? When you do that, you have no reference to what you have to do tomorrow, what happened yesterday, how that's going to affect you, what's happening for the remainder of the week. If you just think, I need to practice this piece and get better at it, what if you practice that piece too much and then tomorrow you're exhausted for something that's important, or you don't recognize that, oh, I need to have all 3 movements prepared by the end of next week, so I can really focus on movement 1 today, movement 2 tomorrow, movement 3 the next day. Or you can think about that in the context of fundamentals also. You know, there's basically too many things as a trombone player, or I imagine as any instrumentalist, that you have to stay on top of all the time to fit all those things in one particular day anyway. So you need to look at the way those things lay out over the course of maybe every 3 to 4 days, or even the course of an entire week. So I think playing coproche etudes is really important, but I can't do that every single day. But if I plan my whole week, I can make sure there's at least 2 days that week that I get it in. And so if I don't practice it today, I don't freak out about it, because I know that's in the schedule for Wednesday.
Right.
So it's got that element of my technique is not going to leave me, because it's planned that over the course of week everything will get covered. And I'm a believer in familiarity over volume. So it's not that I need to practice everything all the time every single day. It's just I can never let any particular element of my musicianship get too far away. I don't want to wake up and go, oh my gosh, I haven't played coproche, I haven't played minor scales in 3 weeks. Ugh. You know, it's like, no, it's in there. It's in there. Maybe not every day, but it never gets too far away.
I love that. I'm going to start doing that myself.
Yeah.
I want to take a lesson from you, man.
Right.
Come on.
Don't be ridiculous. You and Mike would just, whatever.
I've been trying to include this because several folks have been kind enough to write in and with suggestions about the interviews, and everybody's always interested in equipment. So I'm trying to get a little bit more diligent about asking folks like yourself about, and I know you're a longtime courtois artist. Tell us what equipment you use.
I play the Courtois. It's called the Creation New York model. It's a tenor trombone that I helped design with him. Paul Pollard helped design their bass trombone. I think they're also doing some other models, like Creation Amsterdam with Jorgen. And
nice.
So it's a great trombone. I think it responds very, very easy. It's got a bright sound, but in all the positive ways that you can view bright, as in it has a nice range of overtones, which is fantastic. And I play a Grego Alessi 5B mouthpiece. So I have nothing but overwhelmingly positive things to say about the instrument. It's great, and we've done a million blind tests with my students where they try out 5 different horns, and it seems like we keep coming back to this one all the time. So that's great. And then with the mouthpiece thing, I'm very happy with the mouthpiece that I play, but I think it's worth mentioning for this that I've gone through a total evolution, or I should say a complete journey on the mouthpiece thing. When I started at the Met, I was playing on something that was the equivalent of a 5G. It was a Doug Elliott, but that's what I was playing. And then when I made that first recording, Act 1, you know, in the later days of the recording session, because, you know, sometimes these recording days are 7-8 hours long, I would start to burn out. You know, there was nothing left. And what I noticed, I was having a fair number of no speaks. It's like I didn't necessarily feel tired, but it's like it just ended for me. And what I noticed was that I felt like I needed more space in the mouthpiece, so that even when I started to swell and get more tired, things like that, there would still be room. So over time, I evolved from a 5 to a 4, and I'd switch mouthpieces every 6 months because I had to keep doing my job, so I couldn't make huge leaps. But I literally went 5, 4.5, 4, 3.5, 3, 2.5, 2, all the way down to a 1, where I was playing a 1 rim and a 5G cup. And then my playing, the way that I play changed. I evolved and I learned new things as I went that direction. And over time, I've come all the way back.
Wow. Okay.
So literally, I've played basically every mouthpiece in the book. And I guess the one thing you can take from that is that if you know how to play, or if you can play, it doesn't really matter. I'm sure you can give Joel Laskey any mouthpiece on the shelf and it'll work out fine. And I can say something, similar in that I've played every mouthpiece you can basically play and managed to do my job well with all of them. It's just a matter of what sound you like and what characteristics you value more than others.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's very cool. Weston, thank you so much for your time today. I always kind of end with this because we do have a lot of young folks out there, and you've already given all of us, even us old folks, some great advice today. And you've given excellent direction. But even more pointedly, I always give artists an opportunity to just offer one piece of advice to young musicians who are sitting out there saying, I want to be the next Weston Sprott. If you can sum it up in that way, it doesn't have to be one, it could be a couple. But.
I would say, don't try to be the next me, be the next you. There's only one you, first of all. I think one of the things I see with students oftentimes is don't assume that all the improvement that you can make on the trombone is going to come while you actually hold a trombone in your hand. The basics of musicianship revolve around having a great understanding of style and a great understanding of pitch and rhythm. And those are things that remain the same regardless of what instrument you hold in your hand. So spend a lot of time making sure that you're rhythmically solid, that you can conduct and sing all the rhythms on the page, that you can sing all the notes that are on the page on pitch, and also that you listen enough that you understand the style, you understand all of the different little idiosyncrasies of the musical language. So that when you pick up your instrument, you're not like someone who's only learned Spanish from a book, but you speak Spanish like someone who moved to Spain for 3 years, and they know all the curse words and all the little cool slang and all the other stuff, because that's really what high-level musicianship is about. So, of course, you got to put your trombone in your hand and play scales and lip slurs and long tones and all those other things, but make sure you put enough emphasis on all the other things that are actually away from the instrument that are going to make your musicianship better.
Wow, awesome. Well, I hope everybody has enjoyed this as much as I have. An incredible day today talking to Weston, and we were very fortunate to get him. Like I said, been rehearsing this morning with the Met, heading back to have a performance this evening. So, Weston, thank you again for your time and all the great thoughts and insights and everything. We will see all of you next time on Bone2Pick.